Morning, Sharon. How are you doing today?
I'm good, dear. How are you?
I'm great. So, interesting thing came up the other day. We were just talking about some of the big mistakes that buyers make when they're
Yeah.
looking for a home. And you had mentioned you know, the just the appearance of the home can often, people go in and
Yeah.
it's well decorated and or staged even,
Yeah.
and a nice fresh coat of paint and so forth. And this can lead people to make bad decisions.
Yes. Yes. So it's kind of what I refer to as eye candy. Okay. So it's very easy to walk into a home and you can start with the driveway. You can come up the walkway and it's all really nicely landscaped. Uh, but for example, even in the nice landscaping, you see that. What I'm going to be looking at is, wow, is this slope going towards the house when they landscaped it? If it is, and all the water is going into the foundation, and you're going to have seepage at some point. Big
Right.
problem, something you really want to prevent. Or maybe they already have seepage. I don't know. When we go into the basement, we'll find out. That's if it's not finished. If it is finished, and it looks really got all high end stuff, but I can look along the baseboards and I can see water coming, like I can see where it's been wet, especially like, in the corners, or if I know where the landscaping is outside, I'll know where to look inside. um you know it, you walk into a house and the original house is 150 years old and renovations were just completed, and it looks really incredible. It's modern and it's absolutely beautiful. But you walk along the floor and you realize if you have a drink or two too many, you might not be you be falling forward because the floor is so sloped. And again, there's little things you can do to fix that. It doesn't necessarily mean something wrong. It could be, but you need to find out. It could be just something as simple as just the leveling that you need on the floor. But if the new flooring is put down and now you're seeing cracks in all of the flooring, um, was it done right? If it's a nice porcelain or ceramic tile and you even see cracks happening, not just one little crack where someone happened to drop a hammer, but you see some consistent little cracks throughout these things. Was it laid properly? So then you're in the lifting out ductwork and stuff to see what's underneath the thing, and lifting out the air vents. I mean, things like that, right? So there's things you're always looking for. So you're looking for bug infestations, you're looking for mold, you're looking for leakage, you're looking for structural damage. I walked into one house a couple of weeks ago, and it was also completely renovated, and I leaned up on a support beam in the basement and it moved. It
Oh,
made me
wow.
really nervous.
Yeah,
Because
that's like literally the house is falling down around you.
does that mean it would have fell down on me? Like chances are that support at that time, it was probably just that extra thing that didn't mean anything. Honestly, I don't want to find out that way, and I don't want my clients to find out that way. So
Mhm.
if I lean on a support and it moved, I've got some questions and I need to dig deeper. So if you see supports there and they're not secured, and that's consistently throughout the home, there's all kinds of things like that to look for. It's easy when you walk in and you get this beautiful new windows and you get new roof and you've got a new driveway and you get a new front door and you've got a new kitchen and you got this most amazing, bathroom, and it all feels like it's a resort, and like a spa. Um, it's important to look for those things
Right.
because these are the things that can cost you a lot of money to fix down the road. I will still look for wiring. I'll still look at the plumbing. Again, I'm not a home inspector. I don't know all of this stuff, but there's some basic things that I'm looking for personally on behalf of every client that I'll walk into a home. So I'll walk into a furnace room, for example, so that I can check on underneath like in the ceiling. So I'm looking at the floor underneath from the main floor, and I can see the wiring running through. I can see pipes running through. I can see if it's water pipes we don't use anymore, that kind of stuff, the connect piping and things like that. So there's all kinds of things to look for that could cost you a lot of money, or an insurer won't insure you.
So I was just going to say along those lines, like some things they have to disclose, right? Like knob and tube wiring or asbestos, things like that have to be disclosed.
When you talk about have to disclose, I don't know what they know and don't know. People will claim they don't know it. They don't know what's in the house. They didn't do an inspection. They have no idea when they bought the house or they inherited the house or whatever. Nothing was ever done. So I will never rely on that alone. If that's something, we need to go back on later, it's one thing. As if I'm working as a listing agent, I ask those kind of questions. And personally, I will tell that client, listen, we need to make this information known. Okay, we need to disclose this. Not everyone does. And so we have to assume that there could be things either they didn't disclose or maybe they just didn't know. So now if you're going in as a buyer agent, then I'm going in assuming I'm just looking with a fresh set of eyes. So I have my own checklist that I'm going through when I go to a property. And they become things that is just a part of me. It's not like I've got an itemized list. It's probably not a bad idea, but I do go in and I do walk through and I'm looking for certain things. So I don't assume anything. So we make sure also that your home inspector is a good home inspector, so that they also are not assuming anything, and they're looking for the asbestos. They're looking for the aluminum wiring. They're looking for the knob and tube. Again, if a home is finished, if the basement is finished, there's things we can't tell. But based on the age of the home, we know that a home that knob and tube was stopped at a certain time, or we know that the connect tubing, water pipes and stuff were at a certain time. So we know based on the build of the house, time frames of what we would look for in that house.
So you often hear realtors talking about how they can get the most for your home by, like, you can do some really inexpensive things like painting and things like that to really increase the value of the home. So it's like, as a buyer, what sort of things like would the sellers have done to get their home ready for sale that they're going to hope for a much higher price for, but in reality they haven't put that much money into it to make the home's real value increase?
Right. So paint can cover up a lot of things. It can cover up, if it was a smoker, it can cover up stain, leak signs from the past and things like that. It can cover that up. Or it could be just a fresh look in the house, right? And that fresh look does go a long ways. There is no doubt about it. If someone's done a neutral paint and they just need a freshening up, it's beautiful. You can change your lighting and it's beautiful as long as your wiring can accommodate it and that kind of thing. So change your lighting. There's things you can do, like kitchens and bathrooms are obviously big upgrades. Flooring is a big upgrade, but again, is it done properly? Does it have the right underlay? Windows are a great upgrade. Usually they're done by professionals. Usually they're sealed properly, but you're going to look for those things. So even if I walk into a house, there's a certain way to check the plumbing, right? And check the water flow to make sure you got enough pressure, because that would be signs of something not working right or something working okay. Right? You could turn on a whole bunch of, you could turn on the microwave and the stove and some lights. And if you start getting flickering going on all of a sudden, we got a power pole that is not accommodating what we want to do here. So, that kind of thing. Some things you don't find out till after you move in and you go to plug in a vacuum and you find you're blowing. And I've done that myself. I've bought properties myself. And every time I plugged in the vacuum, I would lose the power. I end up changing the whole panel, and I didn't mind doing that. But I'm just saying these are things you can look for that tells you there's something else that needs attention. It doesn't even mean it could be a bad thing, but it's just being in the know and knowing what you're looking for, because we've just talked about your down payment on a home. your 1.5% closing costs, you kind of, out of money by the point you get into the house. So you don't want to rip up all the floors because they weren't put down right, even though they look good.
Although having said that, if you get the right financing, you can get extra money to do some renovations.
Right.
So it's only on an insured, so a high ratio mortgage that it would be available. But and I'm sure you could get like a real bargain if someone didn't paint for whatever reason. Maybe they're selling the house because the person passed away or they're sick or something like that. And, so they're not available to paint it, and there's no money to hire a painter to come in.
That's
so
right.
maybe that could be an excellent opportunity for a buyer. It's funny we were talking about these things because I'm thinking back to when my mom bought her place, and she used an inexperienced realtor, and they told her that the electrical panel, I think they told her it was 100 watts. At the time, a lot of people were even putting in 200 watts, but it's like, she's lived there probably 30 years now. And, to this day, she can't have the kettle and the toaster plugged in the kitchen at the same time, or she'll blow a fuse. And, it's really annoying, know.
So sometimes that is the panel itself. Other times it's just that they ran too much off of one.
Well, it's only a 60 watt panel. So, and due to some condo thing or whatever, she's not been able to upgrade it.
Yeah.
So it's that's just an example, because the realtor actually told her it was 100 watts, but it was actually only 60.
Gotcha.
And the other thing, so it was, I don't know, a 30-year-old house or something at the time she bought it. But the oven that came with the place was like really hard to get an oven that size. Like you can't get a new one that size.
Right.
And something had happened to the glass and the window in the front of the oven, and they had just replaced it with window glass. Unfortunately, she didn't get a home inspection, which probably would have caught the electrical panel as well. But the first time that she used the oven, of course, the glass shattered because it wasn't designed to withstand like 400-degree heat.
Yeah.
So, and it was not an oven that you could get a replacement for, because you'd have to cut a big chunk out of the counter.
So it was a condo-sized stove.
Exactly.
Yeah, not like the new condos we have today with the big equipment, but at that time, apartment size.
Yeah, and you could not find another one of that size to fit in that space. She got lucky. She was able to locate, I guess someone was throwing out the apartment size stove because they were redoing the kitchen.
Yeah.
She was able to get the glass out of that one, or maybe just from the front door. I don't know. But yeah, so it's funny, like the things that you would never think to, like who puts window glass in a stove? But yeah, it's one of those things. It's like if you don't have a stove, that can be a major issue if you like to cook. So on another note with like wiring, it's like you can't get fire insurance with knob and tube wiring.
That's right.
And you can't get a mortgage without fire insurance.
Right.
So if you close without conditions, you're up the proverbial creek right now. If it's knob and tube wiring. So
yeah. And again, so it's what to look for, right? And looking for the little certification on the electrical panel, and when it was last, when it was installed, or when it was last inspected or upgraded. So all of these things you gotta pay attention to. And still, every single home is different, right? I've bought and sold a lot of properties personally. Every year and a half for the longest time, I was switching a new property. And you find something different in every single home, right? So you kind of have to know that when you're like, you want to do as much as you can up front. You want as many eyes on as you can, experienced eyes. So you want your real estate agent to know what they're looking for. You want your home inspector to know what they're looking for. And you kind of trust your eyes, you trust your ears, you trust the squeaks and sounds under your feet. Just use all of your senses when you're buying your home. And I really mean that, because if something doesn't look right, question it. If something don't smell right, question it, I remember going into a home, for example, and As soon as I opened the front door, I could smell mold.
Mhm.
And the home was impeccable, but it was my greyhound nose at work that day, and I just smelled it when I opened the door. And so I kind of followed my nose, and I went around. But what had happened was it in the basement, and these people had, it was a dated home, but it was very, very well maintained.
Mhm.
So what they did is in the cold room, they sealed up the holes in the cold room for the airflow. And
Mhm.
then they put some drywall up on the ceiling to finish the room to make it like a storage room. Now,
Yeah.
there's things you can do, but here was a cold room that now was insulated and had drywall and all of that. There was no airflow, but there was still moisture coming from the cement, and there was nowhere for it to go. So when you open the room, it really, and also on the door. So you open the door to the cold room, and there was a sheet of insulation on the door. So they did it because they didn't want the cold from the cold room. Unfortunately, it wasn't done right. Now, this wasn't a case of, this was just really bad, stale air, and it was easy enough to correct because it was all contained to just this one room. So it just meant that that in this case, my buyer was fine with it because they just needed to go in and rip all of that out, and
Mhm.
then either leave it as a cold room, and unplug, pull the stuff out of the holes and leave it as a cold room and use it as a storage room, cold room, or do it properly if you want it done. But
Mhm.
that could have really cost that home seller, because if I didn't know what I was looking for and I didn't understand what was done wrong, then someone would open the front door and the first thing they would think is, wow, this house is full of mold. I don't want to touch it. I know it's there. I can smell it. But it was just a case of the cold room done wrong and all that moisture. And chances are they were just in the cold room and got something before they left the house.
So that actually leads me to a question. You were saying knowing what to look for. Are home inspectors regulated yet? Because I know at one point anyone could hang out a shingle and identify themselves as being a home inspector, and I don't think there was really much recourse if they missed a major problem in your home. Like obviously they don't have X-ray vision. They may have tools which can help them see through some of the walls,
Yes.
but some things no one will be able to detect without
Yeah.
tearing the wall out.
Yeah.
But is there any recourse currently, or do you just have to find someone with a really good reputation when you're getting a home inspector?
Well, you get a home inspector, you will know, like, you can, it's not hard to find out which bodies they're registered with. So if they're registered with different bodies, then there's requirements on you to maintain that registration. There's insurance that they can carry. Don't take one without insurance, just like a contractor. Don't take a contractor without insurance. Real estate agents, we carry insurance, right?
Yeah.
As a mortgage broker, you carry insurance. So these are things that you make sure that they have. And so, I mean, again, for me personally, I'll have my handful that I work with that have worked for me repeatedly over and over and over. My clients are happy with them. I'm happy with them. I can see the kind of things they point out. They'll come to me with, certain issues, and we're able to look for a resolution. So that's the other thing. So you do your home inspection. Remember that a home inspection is a to-do list. So if you look at it that way, now if there's anything major, then yes, it's going to have to be addressed, and yes, it provides an opportunity to walk away. But it doesn't mean you can throw anything in an offer, have an offer accepted, and then take the home inspector and then renegotiate the whole thing. That's not what it's about. Okay, if there's a major problem, then we can give the homeowner an opportunity to correct it, or you can look at it in factors and the cost, and there's a bit of mediation that takes place. But mostly look at your home inspection as a to-do list. So they're walking in, they're looking for all of those things that could go wrong, so if we're seeing moisture around a furnace, for example, we had that in when we just did, a few weeks back, and we saw water everywhere. And this is a very nice furnace. I was like, oh, wow. So now we address with my home inspector, we looked at it, and he was able to tell me the cause of it, because he is an experienced home inspector, and he could tell me the cost to repair it and that kind of thing. So now I go back at the seller and I go, hey, listen, here's something we need to pay attention to. And, the cold is yet ahead of us. and you don't want all of this water sitting here in your furnace. And so they, of course, didn't know it. They were able to correct it right away, and they provide evidence. They corrected it by a professional. So we requested it be done by a professional. We request proof that it's been done, so that we kind of also have a recourse as well. Then when we go back and say, hey, you've already corrected this, how come? If there's another issue, usually there isn't. That's the end of it. But being methodical about what we're looking for, how to handle the problems, what your ability as a homeowner, you're going to have a to-do list. So, it's not a case of someone's going to trim the grass to a certain degree, or you don't like that fixture. That's not what we're talking about, right? But if you've got certain things that that, again, depends on the price you paid for the house and the market value of the home, with a few things done as well. But regardless, even as a brand new home, expect there's things you're going to need to do. You just don't want them to be costs that are affecting your quality of life if you don't get them done right away.
So here's an opportunity to clear up a common point of confusion, because when you're getting a mortgage, you often need to have an appraisal done. And
Yes.
a lot of people use the appraiser with a home inspector, and they are two entirely different things.
Yes.
An appraiser is just making sure that the home is in saleable condition in the event that you don't pay your mortgage, and the lender needs to do a power of sale. They want to make sure that they can sell that home quickly. They don't want to have it sitting on the market for any period of time.
Right.
They want to get them off their books. So they require an appraiser to make sure that the value is worth what you paid for it. And that can be a problem. If you buy a house and the appraiser goes in and says, this house is worth $800,000 and you offered $900,000, you need to come up with that extra $100,000 yourself if you don't have an out by having a condition of financing on your offer. So that's what an appraiser does, is he just goes in, takes some pictures, and does a market comparison, basically, to like the similar houses in the neighborhood and what they have sold for recently. There's a couple of different methods that they can use to assess the value. But anyways, he will not pick up like the wiring not being great or anything along those lines. Like,
Right.
Sure, notices something that's going to affect the resale value, he will factor that in.
Yeah.
But he's certainly not going through and checking like all the outlets and things like that a good home inspector will do.
Not their area of expertise.
Yeah, two entirely different things. So
Yeah.
and I've run into that before. It's like, well, we've had a home inspection. Why do we need an appraiser? And vice versa. So
yeah. And I mean, the appraiser is another whole conversation in itself. But yeah, an appraiser is not a home inspector, and a home inspector is not an appraiser. Home inspector is there to go through, point out the issues, look for potential problems, give you a maintenance list, how to manage your home, how to run for it. This is how it works. And give you tell a bit of a story with that particular home, in terms of how you walk through operating and maintaining it. The appraiser, the market value, protecting the lender. So yes, there are times, the best they can do. The only challenge thing we work with the appraisers if they come in a bit short of your purchase price, and that then is something that we have to work out, especially if your purchase is firm at that point. You can have
a problem.
Yeah. So I have been fortunate enough. Anytime I've had an appraiser involved, I've always where we can talk to our lenders and say, can we get this done before the financing is approved, before it's done, firmed up, because we don't want those surprises after the fact when now there's no recourse. But they know nothing about the structure and the operating of the home itself, for sure.
And it can be difficult sometimes to get an appraiser in a timely manner. If it's a very busy market, and you're in an area that doesn't have a whole lot of appraisers, they can get there when they get there. I mean, you might have to pay for a rush job, or, they might not be able to get it in. You might have to ask for an extension on your condition of financing.
But it's better that at least have to go for an extension on it than to firm it up and then have a low appraisal come back, because now,
It's a big risk. I mean,
yeah,
you don't want to, if unless you've got no choice, you don't want to take the risk, right? I mean, I'm sure you would be able to look at similar homes and give them a pretty good idea of what the value is, but it also depends. Like, appraisers can be very different depending on whether it's an insured versus a non-insured deal. When we're dealing with alternative lenders, the appraisers tend to be very, very conservative.
yeah,
They will often come in below what most realtors would consider the fair market value. And, that's intentional, because the appraiser works for the lender, not for the buyer. Even if you're paying him, he's working
yeah,
for the lender. The
yeah,
lender owns the appraisal report when it's done. So the appraiser is going in there to make sure that if the lender ends up stuck with the property because you don't pay your mortgage, then they're not going to be out any money, that they can get fair market value for it based on the
that's right.
condition when they buy it.
Yeah,
So they can be very conservative on getting the value. So having that as a condition of finance is very important in your sales or your purchase contract.
I will tell you that I've done enough deals to know that oftentimes, and this is almost again a shameless plug for another reason why you work with a mortgage broker, because when you work with, like, for example, you and I work together, so there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of hands-on. This is not just one file of 50 on my desk. Okay, this is one client that I'm working on, I'm working with you on, and always, Rick, I got this many days is the best I can get you. You need this, and we need this appraisal because I got a few concerns. I want to make sure. I think we're okay, but let's make sure this happens. So we know that if you can't make it happen, you're going to come back. Listen, this is not happening. We got to have the extension. If they don't want to grant the extension, there's nothing we can do. But if it's simply for the appraiser, they'd be kind of crazy not to, because they can run into it with an expire as well, because that's something out of our control. However,
perhaps the market's gone up in value and they think they can get more money for it.
Exactly. And this is, sometimes we've had to time it. And I said, well, if you're buying this and they bought it firm anyway, then, the appraiser's going in, and we saw things like that in this market that just dropped. So if you got your appraisal 1 week, it was one rate. And if you happen to be one of the ones that caught a week later, it was a different story, right?
The appraiser appraises it based on the market value at the time of the appraisal.
At the time of the appraisal, not last week, not next week. I will say, though, that I do know of incidents, many, where the big banks send an appraiser, but they don't send them in closer to closing. And you've done your financing, it's firm. You've forgotten about everything. You've firmed up everything. Your lender told you were good to go. And so you firmed it up. And then they decide to send an appraiser, and you go, what? Yeah, we didn't do that yet. But why not? You firmed up the purchase. You told them it was okay. And they really not too concerned, because it still falls back on that buyer if the appraiser goes in 3 days before closing. But I've seen them do it. Now, I haven't had one where I had to deal with the price, but it really made us really nervous that they would do that.
I've had situations. So some lenders will require that you order the appraisal through a online portal computer. On the computer, and you have no control over who you get. It's just like whoever is on their approved list that decides to accept the job, that's what you get. You can't really do much in those situations to be like, we need this yesterday or whatever. Like, they might be willing to do it yesterday for a rush fee, but they might not. They might just be like, it'll be done when we get to it. And it's like, so if you're with a lender like that, and some people choose those lenders because they want the lower rate, that lender might be more competitive on rate or something like that. And because of that, maybe they're a bit less flexible when it comes to appraisals. So, when you're working with a bank, the bank has their list of appraisers or whatever. You can't usually go in and say, send out, like, you get what you get.
Yeah.
Because I work with many different lenders,
Right.
I can, work with a lender where I can choose any appraiser that is on the list of approved appraisers.
Yes.
So if one can't do it in time, I can call the next appraiser, and so on and so forth. If there's no one on that list that can do it in time, maybe I try a different lender's list of approved appraisers
Yes.
and move
Yeah.
the deal if that's the only way it gets done. I don't like moving deals because, there's costs involved to the lenders when they start underwriting things. And often I will try and get a pre-approval in place. Well, usually I'll try and have a pre-approval in place and so forth. But if I have to make the deal close, I will move the deal if it comes down to getting an appraiser in there in time.
Yeah.
Now, if rates have changed, you might have to pay a higher interest rate or whatever. If I move the deal, like, there can be consequences, but it's much better than being like, okay, well, we can't get it done before the condition of finance. Don't want to lose the property. Do you take the risk, or do you want to maybe switch to a different lender and get it done
Right.
in time? So,
and that's the beauty of something that we have, again, in the mortgage brokerage, that you got more control over that. We have more, and there are times when we've had to look at it. You know what? We need an appraiser who understands this, and we know this appraiser understands that. No different than having a home inspector that understands properties with wells and septics, or and so there's always that extra, and I find we always have that extra, so we're able to make the connect with the right people with the knowledge and skill set to make it happen with good informed decisions, right?
Well, I mean, if I have a choice, I have appraisers I like to work with, not because they're going to fudge the value of the deal,
Right.
or anything,
Yeah.
but simply because I know that they're reasonable people, and when they say they'll do something, they get it done.
Yeah.
Right? It's not going to be like, oh yeah, well, there was a bit of traffic or whatever, and I was tired, so I just went home, and I'm not in the area tomorrow or the next day, but maybe I'll get there on the weekend.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't have to deal with that with these people. You know that if they say they'll be there, they will be there that day. Like, obviously they're human, they have to deal with traffic and things as well.
Yeah.
But if they're getting there at 8 p.m. at night, they will get there, right?
Yeah. And it's really important, because I also remember, Rick, a few years back, we had an appraiser went in on a property, and their numbers were very unreasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sending you pages of listings and properties, and details, and saying, Rick, here's this number, and I mean, just page after page after page. It wasn't like one or two properties. And I remember you did get those numbers changed. And it was based on the facts that we provided, but this was an appraiser who really didn't have the skill set needed to give us the best information on that property.
Well, unfortunately, appraisers are like everyone else. Some are new to the industry, and unfortunately, if that's who you get as your appraiser, sometimes they make mistakes. I had one case where the appraiser went in, and there was a fireplace in the living room, and he compared it to other houses that had the fireplaces, and he's like, there's no fireplace here. So that changed the value. And it's like, how do you miss, this giant fireplace, like right in the middle of the living room?
Yeah.
But, it happened. And, you can, appeal to the appraiser to change it. And, if you can make a strong case, maybe you can get it changed. But sometimes,
the headache of getting that done was not fun.
If you have a good working relationship with them, then they're more likely to change the numbers. Like, they're not, as I said, they're not going to fudge the numbers because they want to,
No, of course not. And we're not asking anyone to fudge. We just want competent people who know the process,
exactly.
Understand
and you probably don't want to buy a property that you think is worth 900,000, but is really worth 700,000, because you'd be like, well, why am I spending all this extra money if it's not worth what, like, the fair market value is that much lower?
Yeah.
So that's another consideration. But yes, I mean, it is good if you have a working relationship with an appraiser. And as I said, like usually, if it's unreasonable, you can talk to the appraiser. Sometimes you can get a second appraiser to go in. You're going to cost more money, but
money and time and the aggravation and the upset and the frustration with it all.
100%.
Because remember, all of these things are happening on the clock, right? So,
well, that's the thing. If you've got a condition of finance and the appraiser's already been in, and you need to send in a new appraiser, I mean, it's so yeah. Obviously, if I have the opportunity to choose who the appraiser is, and I'm familiar with the area, so I know the appraisers, then I will try and use that appraiser if at all possible. But lenders have restrictions on who you're allowed to use and so forth. So this is one of the things that I factor in when I'm deciding where to place the loan. Like obviously rate is important, but rate is not everything at the end of the day, right? So
there's many factors to getting it done, and that appraisal, the financing don't happen without it.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's a lot of it certainly helps understand the process for a lot of, especially a first-time home buyer. The variations between the home inspector and the appraiser, and some of the things, it just gives an insight to behind the scenes things that we are dealing with for them and on their behalf. Now, lots of times when this has gone to one of the primary banks, these are things that are out of our control. And we're not able to get the behind the scenes challenge of what's going on. We're just getting approved or disapproved. Don't have the ability or have anyone to work with if there's no face associated with it, and your file is just a number that goes to somebody in a system. So those details and the handling of those details make a difference in you getting that home or not getting the home. So anyway, thank you, dear. That was a thorough one.
Great. Thanks, Sharon.
Okay, bye.
You too. Bye.